What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel where we learn, do, and talk about photography until we're sick of it. So I'm coming to you today from my new YouTube studio. I hope you like it. No, this is absolutely my garage. I don't think I've ever hosted a YouTube video here for reasons that should be obvious to you upon first sight. But I wanted to give you a quick video here, a quick discussionary video. Quick because it's extremely hot in here. And also because I'm packing up for my excursion to Minnesota. So if you've never seen the gorgeous landscape opportunities around Lake Superior in Minnesota, I do encourage you to subscribe so you can have a look at that and see maybe if it interests you for a future trip. Also got a little head start on my road beard. You can see my white hairs coming in, which is appropriate for this video because I'm coming to you not as a fresh-faced new photographer on the scene, but as a wizened and experienced landscape photographer, because I want to talk about the sustainability of your interest in photography. What brought this contemplation to mind is my brilliant friend Dusty Baker, who has a podcast called Words with Artists, which I'll link down to in the video description. She invited me on as a guest on her podcast, and I gave her the same sort of introductory spiel that I have been given for several years now, and talking about how I've done photography for about 20 years is usually what I say. And while I was doing the podcast, I realized, no, I've actually been doing photography for over 20 years. I've been doing landscape photography for 18 years. Not to get into my whole story, but I've been investing in equipment and education for 11 years, and I've been selling landscape photography professionally for 5 years. So I have some experience with landscape photography. Over the course of those 20 years, I've had the chance to see lots of changes. The camera technology's changed. The trends and styles of photography have changed. The way we present and consume images has changed considerably. My own attitudes and thoughts about photography, my motivations for doing photography have certainly changed. And one change that's really notable for, I think especially for someone like me on the publishing end, is the cast of faces involved in landscape photography has also changed. So the people that I used to do landscape photography with 20 years ago, by 10 years ago, they were all new people. If you followed landscape photography on social media even for the last 5 years, you probably noticed that there is a recurring wave of people who suddenly become interested in landscape photography and then, for better or worse, for whatever reason, lose interest in it or sort of fall off the map. And so the thought that kept occurring to me was that it's likely that the way that I've been flexible and changed my approaches to photography has a relationship to my ability to sustain interest in it for so long. So in this video, I wanted to share a few, not necessarily tips, but maybe reflections or observations for how my perspective has contributed to my enjoyment of a long-lived and mature photographic practice. So like I said in the introduction, over the course of the last 20 years, I've seen lots of people become interested in photography, decide it wasn't for them, and then lose interest in it. So I think what really merits being said in prefacing this discussion is that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you tried photography and decided you didn't like it, definitely don't just keep doing it for the sake of commitment, Find something you really enjoy to do. At least you tried it. I think that's cool. So we can still hang out. And I quite frequently see people take up photography in the wake of a divorce or the loss of a loved one, maybe a time of depression or feeling disconnected. And if photography helped you get through something like that and you kind of feel like it's not as important to your life anymore, then by all means move on. And it would almost be more sad to keep taking the medicine absent the illness, so to speak. And there are any number of admirable justifications for which people give up even beloved pastimes as their priorities and values shift. But for every 100 people like that, there are probably at least 10 who got into photography hoping to do something ambitious with it, or at least make it some sort of a long-term project, but who ended up losing interest or getting distracted along the way. And so the purpose of this video, I hope, is to inspire those people to take it back up if they want to, or maybe to inform more beginning photographers that this may be a hurdle that you have to overcome at some point, and maybe if you can keep some of this in your back pocket, you'll be better armed than the average photographer when you face that situation. Okay, I'll start with the one that was probably most helpful to me. Having this mindset changed, I think, probably prevented me from hitting a huge photographic slump. I think I was really on a trajectory to get quite bored with photography. And that's probably the way that I think the best way to think about what causes us to lose interest in photography is when and why do we become bored with it. And this happened on accident to me, so I'm going to try to share this with you. So maybe if you can, put yourself in the position to have this mindset change on purpose, then you'll sort of be ahead of the curve. So, right, and that for me was to sort of go through a process of interrogating what photography is. Right, what is photography to me? What is photography to you? What is photography? Right, up until the point that I was thinking about that, I think I was probably thinking like, what is a photograph? And I probably thought that my idea as a landscape photographer was to take whatever I knew or had learned, which was probably a considerable amount, about what a photograph is, right? All those elements of operating the camera and exposure and light and scene and atmosphere and weather and all of those elements that go to make a photograph, right? Those were the things that I was bringing into my approach as I came to the camera. I know what a photograph is, or I know of what a photograph is. How do I make the thing that I think of as a photograph? And so I was doing some landscape photography in Hokkaido, Japan. This was not like an extravagant trip. I was stationed there in the Navy, and so Hokkaido being sort of an elite or photographic destination, I thought, well, I've got to seize on the opportunity. And I took my own car and was driving around the island and doing photography. And I think that typical mindset was probably a big part of my conception of the photography that I was doing there, which was, the more elite or iconic, dramatic, extreme the location, right, the more elite the photograph. And so I probably had in mind that the path towards improving my photography was improving photography locations. And while I was there and, probably a few days into my trip and probably taken several dozen photos, I was reviewing the images in my car. I realized that what I valued in the photos I was taking was not like the exotic location. It was this recurring shape in all the photos. There was this. I mean, I've done a study on this, but it was this shape that really resembles the Japanese character Te. And so I won't get into all that, but there were photos literally that I could have taken anywhere. And what I valued in the photos, they could have been made anywhere in the world. I probably could have found places here in my hometown to convey what I was conveying through these photos. You guys ever listen to the B&H Photography podcast? There's the host who's a photographer named Alan Weiss. He said something on the podcast that really stuck with me. He said that he'd been doing photography for some number of years, right, late into his career, when he realized that he'd been taking the same photo over and over again for all those years. And I really connected with that as I was reviewing the photos from Hokkaido. And what I realized as I was reviewing the images there in my car was that what I was conveying through these photos sort of transcended what could be accomplished in a single photograph, right? It would be very difficult to sort of communicate that the purpose of this image is to talk about this shape and the meaning of this shape if you only saw the shape one time, but in a series of images, right, that could be more successfully communicated. So if I asked like 100 photographers, what's photography? Of course, they would probably give me 100 different answers, but likely half of them would probably be giving me that answer for the first time. And so, right, that experience that I had that really refreshed and rejuvenated my approach and outlook on what landscape photography is, or what photography is, what are the bounds of it, and how can I use the medium to reflexively express things about the medium and to express things that can only be expressed in the medium. Those have been very helpful questions for me in finding continued meaning in my photography, and questions that I probably would never even have considered asking if I hadn't taken the opportunity to sort of interrogate what photography is. You've probably heard someone say, don't take a photo of something, take a photo about something. I almost want to eye roll. It's not bad advice. I mean, especially if you've never thought of that before, then sure. What was a game changer for me was thinking not about what my photos are of, or what they're about, or even like what they are or what they aren't, right? These are all nice esoteric contemplations. But what was a game changer for me was when I started thinking about what my photos do. What does my photography do, and what do I want it to do? If your photography is inutile or inactive, then like, at least for me as an art form, that makes it like inherently uninteresting. But if you give it a little thought, you can definitely change that. And, giving it that thought and direction is definitely a way to keep yourself refreshed and engage with your photographic process. So you guys probably know I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Southwest Indiana, not what most people would call like a special place or a conventionally photographically beautiful place. When I was in the Navy, I was stationed to the Far East away from home for 3 years. And when I came home, it was the first time I'd set foot not only on like my home soil here in Indiana, but also in the United States period in 3 years. And I was really lit up with a fervor to photograph the home landscape. And this is sort of where I've started my reputation in my current studies of photography on social media, especially, is as a photographer of the rural and agricultural Midwest landscape. Right. At first, that was cool in the way that other photos that I've taken before are cool. Like I liked the attention. I liked, making photos look good. I liked reaction. But as I shared these photos on social media, showing them in art galleries and art shows as well, what became more and more meaningful to me were not the 10, hey man, great shot, cool, light, 8 thumbs up reactions, right? It was the one comment saying, I've lived here my whole life and I have never thought of the landscape this way. I've never seen photos like this before. It became rewarding to me when I realized that I was building or contributing to like a very limited visual vocabulary that exists for the way that people interpret the scenery of this landscape. And I think that like having that imagery and that visual vocabulary is important for people to interpret their experiences, especially in places where they live. So another great quote, Werner Herzog in the documentary, Werner Herzog Eats His Shoe. He's asked by an interviewer, about his prolific and, somewhat strange filmography of films in the 1970s. And he says that, he's a German independent filmmaker. And he said he thought that his drive to make films was what he saw as an insufficient images, right, was what he said in his sort of limited English, which is to say that specifically probably in the post-World War II German culture, there were insufficient images in the culture to relay or to help interpret the experience of what it means to live in post-war Germany, right? And his desire to like establish that visual vocabulary was his essentially the drive that motivated his filmmaking. And I really identify with that because I feel like in a strong way, I feel that that's what my photos do, right? If nothing else, it gives me a lot of confidence and resilience to criticism. And you can say the things that I hear a lot, like my photography, oh, this photography is just folk art. Well, it's art for people. It does something for people. And so in that case, I think it's an effective piece of artwork. Or, this landscape is not pretty, or it's unconventional, or uninspiring, right? Maybe life in the Midwest is unpretty or uninspiring, or maybe aside from the beauty and the inspiration that we bring to it, right, our life in this landscape would be unbeautiful and uninspiring. And so in that sense, I'd say that I've made an effective piece of artwork. But that doesn't have to be what your photos do, but like having some sense of the agency that you have through your photos, or maybe even the agency that your photos have as actors out in the world, acting in your surrogacy in your stead. That's definitely been a motivator for me to stay behind the camera, to think about what I want my photography to do when I go do photography. Okay, this last one is definitely going to be controversial, but I'd be remiss if I didn't put it out there because it is advice that I believe firmly in. Your landscape photography needs to be less about the landscape and more about you. So we'll keep this one short and simple. Roast me in the comments if you want to. I really think the last thing that we need are more landscape photos expressing the message of how we need to appreciate and conserve the landscape by trampling onto it in hordes to photograph it, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. My hot take is, right, you're a landscape photographer and you're making a photograph to me as a viewer because you have something that you want to tell me, you have some value you want to share, you want to convey some message, and that message is an expression of your thoughts and your feelings through the photograph. Right. I put it that way in the second person because hopefully that makes it sound less selfish and vain. But when I make photos, I'm trying to express something to you about what my thoughts and values and feelings are. I don't mind using my voice to advocate for the arts, and I don't mind using my arts to advocate for my voice. That's very empowering, and I recommend that you do the same. Once you've sharpened a message that you think is important to convey, and you found a way to convey that message to the viewer through the landscape photograph, you're onto something really powerful, and I think you're unlikely to put your camera away for a long time. And I'll leave it there. Roast me in the comments if you want. Be sure to drop a like on the video on your way out, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in Minnesota. Bye.